Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily this Monday morning. I'm Chamberlain. So
it's an all Abuja affair this morning, but I know that all eyes will be on Edo State. Good morning and welcome. I'm Maupe Ogunyusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makine. Good morning and welcome to Abuja.
Well, it may be 24 degrees centigrade here in Abuja, but the temperature, not exactly what the PDP would have wanted, or Labour Party at that in Edo State, because they, right now, just thinking, what next? Because if you go to the courts, okay, I'm not preempting anything, but it's almost as difficult as, you know what they say, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for you to get certain things go your way. On election basis, in this part of the world, and okay, if you think I'm wrong, we'll wait and see what happens. But what a time it was. So you could imagine, who would have thought? After all the back and forth, of course, they will naturally campaign hoping to win. But when they didn't, because the complaints that came through from the PDP is that of election manipulation from the ruling party. The ruling party themselves also said, look, we sold our products, our candidates. People bought it. But Labour, I think they'll be speaking this morning to also see what their perspective is on this matter. But at the moment, the results have been declared. There's been a winner, and there are others.
Well, Chamberlain, you know, I want to imagine that when people go into elections, they go with the mind that whilst, yes, they hope to win, that they'll win, and then there'll be others. You know, there'll be losers. It's going to be a win or lose game. You already know what your chances are. Sometimes you might say that people go in and just to, you know, test the waters. Let me see what it is I can garner. Because when you look at the fact that, you know, 18 political parties contested in these polls, you have to ask, were the remaining 15, were they onlookers? So maybe people are just testing what the waters will be like. I think that the bone of contention, there certainly will be plenty of analysis on Edo elections. But for the analysis to actually make sense, and for us to be able to, hold real water, the question will be, did the votes really reflect the true will of the people of Edo State? Did it follow due process? Was it transparent? Was it free? And was it fair? That will be the basis upon which all of the other analysis as to why this person lost or as to why this person won will make perfect sense. And so far, so good. I think that from the analysis that, you know, quite a number of CSOs have given so far, there have been many gaps noticed in how the process itself was conducted. And I'm sure even our correspondents do have a thing or two to say about the processes. We covered the elections thoroughly and fully, and we saw things that ought not to have happened. But the question, as you always say, is when you go to court, the substantial compliance.
That's the operative word.
Will be the operative word.
What is the measure of substantial compliance?
So do we have a compliance-ometer?
Compliance-ometer.
Yeah, we do.
I like that.
We do.
I love that, as a matter of fact.
You know what the answer is? The judges.
Oh,
they will determine if they say, well, this is what it is. If they rule, they will rule eventually on the matter.
No, I don't think that's what I was referring to.
Well, that's his answer. He may not know that that's what he's referring to, but that is the answer. Because when they get there, that is what will happen. When they adjudicate, they will take a decision.
Okay.
And that's what everybody will go home with.
You know, I like, can we look at an upside? One upside that, I mean, we can celebrate is that as at, I think, the end of day on Saturday, a substantial percentage of the votes cast and the results were uploaded to the IREV. I think that is something to celebrate. As at midday of Sunday, I think we understand we had about 98% or plus or minus of election results already uploaded onto IREV for anyone to see. So if you have contestations about one thing or the other, that's one place, you know, to go. Another thing that I think we can celebrate, maybe when we get to our discussions today, we'll be able to find out the measure of security or a lack of it that was experienced. But the most important thing for me would be the governance issues. Even the run-up to the elections, how much of the governance issues were discussed? For instance, I understand we're talking about the flooding in Maiduguri. in May and July of this year, there were reports of flooding in Edo State. Were those issues substantially dealt with to the effect that we will not have the same kind of thing again? Leading me to that issue of interest for our work this morning. Maybe we'll still get there eventually. The one that even Serap is asking questions about the Ecological Fund. As at the last check, 12 billion naira had been contributed to for the people of Maiduguri to get back their lives. But then what happens to the Ecological Fund? According to what we have, about 40 billion naira had been dispensed at some point. So how far with that? So are we going to have a reversal of this that we're seeing on our screens now, where the people's lives have so far been sort of submerged? So we understand that the waters are abating. Some money is being contributed by several people, but then does that solve the problem that the people are going to evolve into eventually? It's a question.
Well, guys, look, there are several questions about all of these things. So, I don't know. About this flooding matter, look, your guesses may be as good, if not as better, if not better.
I don't think we want to guess. I think we need answers. At this point, people are tired of guessing. People's lives have been gravely impacted as a result of this floods. People have lost their lives. People are going to have to start from scratch again, and they'll be asking questions. There is only so much a people can take. They're tired of guessing, and I think that it's high time they start getting answers. It's not the time for us to throw money at the problem. 40 billion naira ecological funds, 12 billion naira contributed so far. What is the plan? How do we intend to utilize that money to ensure that people get their lives back? These are big questions. And how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again, not just in Borno, but in any other state in Nigeria that has a dam? That's a big question.
This is what we've always done for the past 10 years in this country, if not more. Unfortunately. And they'll throw money at the problem, and then after a while, they buy them mattresses, build a little shelter, give them Indomie.
And lots of food.
And then they move on.
And then, but then does that rebuild their houses? Does that rebuild their lives?
It's just a recurring question.
This particular one, we understand, has been on for decades. I think it was even 2012 it was reported that this particular, dam in contention also had issues. 10 years after it was built, there were issues, and we're still here talking about the same thing.
How did we switch the conversation from Edo to dam?
Well, because speaking about Edo, by the way, you know the thing about elections in this country? Now, I think we had budgeted about 355 billion. This year, we were reading that they said they received about 313 billion naira to conduct the 2023 elections. And next elections, it will be more. And the following elections, it will be more.
Sorry,
so we keep spending much more money.
How much did you say?
313 billion naira for 2023 elections. So we will spend more next elections. But the big question is...
Would this be the kind of processes that... So I'm trying my best to choose my words very carefully. I want to say this kind of results, because what I meant is, is this how the process will continue to be? Will it continue to have question marks on it?
Why are we shying away from electronic voting? Why?
Well, Ayo, take us through the papers. Right? You have it.
The major story on the front pages of all dailies we're looking at this morning is the results of the Edo State governorship elections. Vanguard newspaper, Edo, how Okwebolo floored Igodalo with 44,012 votes. A new Edo is rising as one of the riders, according to the governor-elect. Okwebolo wins 11 of 18 LGAs, Igodalo 7, Apata none. PDP cries foul, backs Governor Fintiri, insists Igodalo won. TSOs express concerns, say coalition disruptions affect result credibility. The Nigerian Tribune has the same story. Edo Juba poll, APC's Okwebolo wins, victorious in 11 LGAs, scores 291,667 votes, defeats Igodalo with 44,393 votes. PDP kicks, rejects results in 3 LGAs, warns INEC on threats to democracy by declaring false results. Okwebolo's victory confirms people's acceptance of APC's ideals, according to Tinubu. Find the details on page 22. Daily Trust. APC's Okwebolo wins the Edo governorship election. PDP rejects results. Baseki calls for calm. Vote buying, disruption of coalition, mar polls. Find out who said that on the inside pages. Tinubu, Buhari, Barao hail own party's victory. And the infographic on the front page gives you an idea of how it all went down. The Daily Independent has Edo Cuba poll. INEC declares APC's Monday Okwebolo winner of poll. PDP rejects results, alleges massive irregularities. Observer groups query authenticity of declared results. Tinubu congratulates Okwebolo, Lord's electoral process. Victory shows confidence in Tinubu's administration. That's according to APC. Flawed poll signposts 2027 expectations. That's according to stakeholders. And if you look at the front page of the Daily Times newspaper, Edo governorship poll, why APC's Okwebolo triumphed. You find that the details on page 4. PDP kicks, alleges irregularities of the coalition process by INEC. Irregularities very apparent, extremely scandalous, according to Eziegwele. Tinubu Ginduje congratulates Edo governor-elect Okwebolo. The front page of Blueprint newspaper has the same story. APC's Okwebolo is Edo governor-elect, Florence Ihodalo, and some other details on the front page. Look at the front page of New Telegraph. INEC declares APC's Okwebolo winner with 291,667 votes. From the Guba poll, PDP's Igodalo polls 247,274, as LP's Akwata garners 22,763. The details on the inside pages of the paper this morning. This Nigeria has it as Edo, it's Monday's day. INEC declares APC's Okwebolo governor-elect, trounces Igodalo Akwata amid accusations and counter-accusations of alleged electoral irregularities. The details on the inside pages. The Guardian has it this way. PDP fumes, demands review as APC's Okwebolo wins. Well, there's some information right there in graphic detail. It's details on page 6 of the paper this morning. The Abuja Inquirer has APC takes Edo, floors Obaseki, PDP. PDP protests, rejects results, leaves one against protest. The details you find on the inside pages of the paper today. These are some of the papers we have for you this morning.
So there you go. Yes, of course, we'll talk about the elections, which is all over the place, as expected. But I'd like you to just write to us, tell us, from your perspective, ever since we've been conducting elections in this country, okay, let's take it from 1999 till date, do you think that we've made any progress whatsoever? Because we're spending a lot more money, and then we'll have a lot of reforms, well, at least some reforms to the Electoral Act. Have you seen any improvement whatsoever, wherever you are, if you voted whatsoever? Tell us. We'd like to hear it. After all, it's your money, by the way. So we're back in a moment to talk about the elections in Edo. Don't go away. Welcome back. Yes, we've got those two gentlemen joining us this morning to talk us through the elections that just happened in Edo State. Jacob Pella is the founder, TAF Africa. He joins us from Benin. We also do have Dr. Chima Amadi, Chairman, Center for Transparency Advocacy, also joining us virtually. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Well,
good morning, Chamberlain. Thank you for having us.
Yes. Let me start with you, Mr. Pella. You're still in Benin, and there are lots of reactions coming through from Benin about this just concluded elections. From what you have seen, I mean, you, from the get-go, preparations, close proximity with the participants, the organizers, the umpire. What's your impression about how all of this turned out?
I think, Chamberlain, I'll look at it from three perspectives. Number one is the process. Was the process followed? Was the process activated? Number two is provision of the electoral resources expected from INEC. And the third will be the performance of INEC and all the election stakeholders. I think by way of making an opening statement, I will say that this election have seen the highest rigor and the highest bidder coming out. And that to say that everyone, especially the two leading political actors, the APC and the PDP, were all involved. And it's unfortunate that things is playing out the way it's playing out, especially for the electoral process. And so whether was the process effectively activated and followed through? Not in all cases. I would say about 40%, 45% of the process could be something that anyone will be glad to see. In terms of provision, we had issues with early show up by INEC at the various polling unit, and I don't know why we keep having this logistical problem. We have, over the years, proposed that INEC should look the other way, especially when it comes to the Road Transport Union. They have been seen and known to be ineffective and not showing up when they should show up, even when the money has been given to them.
We'll still come to that in terms of how all of that step by step. But let me also get Dr. Amadi's initial thoughts on this same matter. You were also in Benin for this election before you, left the place after the elections were over and done with. But going there, you had some expectations. How did it turn out for you?
Yeah. Good morning, Chamberlain. From the deployments of the Center for Transparency Advocacy, and the various reports that our observers have sent in, plus eyewitness accounts from our boots on the ground, I can substantially agree with what Mr. Ekwele, his own assessment, which is not too far off from our predictions of how the elections might be. It was an election that was an anticlimax, if you ask me. Anticlimax in terms of the security concerns, the build-up to the elections. Many observers have felt that it was going to be, or there was going to be a breakdown in security leading to violence. But even though there were pockets of violence here and there, it turned out as we expected or predicted that it was going to be a bazaar of sorts.
Well, could you just tell us, what were those indications?
Both selling and buying.
Pardon me, what did you see that made you predict that it was going to turn out the way it did?
First, you have to look at antecedents. In 2016, there was a build-up of this nature, but then surprisingly, and I was on ground then, turns out that there was a kind of, agreement between the various actors to just go for the highest bidder. So the set-up camps were openly where votes were being traded, and then the security just looked on by. And 4 years later, in fact, in those states, the menace of vote buying came to the fore. And 4 years later, it was repeated. So we saw the build up to these elections and how the canvassers were, putting a price tag on votes. And some of us had predicted that it could go as high as 15 to 20,000. Our fears were basically affirmed because that was what happened during the day. It was just about who was the highest bidder, and that was what you saw in many places. So that could explain why the candidate of the Labour Party was not there to be found, because he was more or less bought out of the market, And again, if you also saw how some of the canvassers were going about, the mobilization, even buying up people's voters cards, the biometric cards, you just realize that it was going to be that way. So these were the indicators we had to show that Edo elections was going to be, as usual, a buyers and sellers market affair. Again, with regards to security, I would say that the security more or less were a little bit professional, even though towards the end of the election, to doing collation, they began to act in a partisan manner, giving cover to various infractions that you would expect that they would have arrested those individuals. And then with regards to the performance of the electoral management body, I would say that, we were satisfied with the fast upload of results from the polling units. And I think by 11 p.m. of that night, the IRF had turned out about like 6% of the results. However, looking at the results being uploaded, and you had concerns when the number of accredited voters and the number of eventual voters, when there are serious discrepancies there, then that tells you, in fact, this election is soft on really of the newspaper. One of the newspaper front page said there, former President Obasanjo just saying that politics itself is not dirty, but what is actually dirty is politicians. The politicians came up to play, and they somehow found a way to make a mess of the process. But when you see the discrepancies in the statistics that you have on IRF, you would also have expected that with regards to the issues of early deployment, there was an issue of INEC officials complaining about no security cover for them. When the NURTW people eventually arrived, there was no security to convey the EMB officials to the various polling units. And so this accounted for some of the delays. But overall, I think we can do better. I think every stakeholder in the process need to sit down and ask themselves serious questions. If we were going to spend all this kind of money, and then at the end of the day, the process is compromised this way.
Well, I was going to ask you if you would give a score to the overall process. What would you give? Over 100. Well,
in terms of process, elections, on the day of elections is the culmination of a process that started a year ago. And so even with the hiccups you had with the flooding and all that, and the fire incident, that the fact that elections was not postponed, and the fact that all the benchmarks that were set for the commission were met, and then on the election day performance, that's where the IRF, worked to perfection. In fact, some people were saying it was even working too fast. I would give the processes leading up to this an A in my book. However, I would also have serious concerns about but then that also brings you to conflict with judicial pronouncements with regards to what determines overvoting. Is it what the BVAS accreditation system has provided for, or is it the election register, as the Supreme Court has said? There were collusions here in some places with some of the ad hoc staff. I expect the commission to come hard on some of these people that colluded. However, given what we experienced in the general elections with the failure of technology, I will give the performance of technology in this instance, I will give it a solid A in my rating. However, like I said, some of the numbers we are seeing, and then the transparency of IRF in exposing these discrepancies, showing us how accredited voters is different from the number of people voting, a far cry. tells you that perhaps the system worked, but perhaps the system has been compromised. So you expect the systems by the commission to step up and then find a solution to this particular menace of overvoting.
And as a result of that, what will you give?
Mike, where is that to me?
Well, then
Not yet. Dr. Chima, yes.
I will give for the politicians, I will give them a solid F. They needed to perform better. I will give them a solid F because what you saw, and like my colleague here said, was an abuse of process, whether it is the buying and selling of votes. I will give a solid F for the voters that allow themselves, to sow their votes. I also give a solid F for the security that comported themselves to an extent, and but then dropped the ball when it was time for collation. I'll give them a C. For the commission themselves that allow these processes to come to the play, but then somehow it's ad hoc staff. Some ad hoc staff allowed for the overvoting because you can't run away from it. The only reason why you saw the accreditation vote numbers being different from the number, the actual votes means that somebody somewhere, a staff somewhere, actually uploaded and colluded there, and so the buck falls on the commission. And I would say that the commission will take responsibility for that. And in this particular case, I would give them a B in my analysis for wherever.
Overall, what would you give? Because I see 2 A's, 1 F, a C, and a B.
This is a far improvement from the general elections, the presidential elections. So I will give the performance of this election a B in terms of processes. Far improvement. Well, but because for me, I gave the process in the presidential election a D in terms of the failure of technology. And to move away from that to the performance, and that this B is a high B plus in my book. Save for the collusion, like I mentioned, of some ad hoc staff, that will have been an A plus in my book.
Dr. J.K. Pele, you've seen him break it down. I mean, in terms of, because you also broke it down to process, provisions, and performance. I imagine that you would also want to give scores along that line, because for a number of people, especially observers like you, the process is more important than the results. So by all means, can you also give us your own rating of the election so far?
Exactly, Mogbe. Process is very important because process will lead you to a verifiable performance rating. I think Dr. Chima is very generous with his numbers and his assessment, and I tend to agree with him in many aspects. But I'd like to give overall performance rating in terms of percentage. I would say 46%. Generally, yes, there are some element of this election that is a far a good improvement from 2023, but it's unfortunate that I will personally describe this election, off-cycle election, as one of the worst. Taking into cognizance the level of preparation and the assurance. I thought that INEC in general would take this election and perform creditably well so that they can begin to redeem the confidence and trust deficit that they have suffered in the previous election. You will notice that we released a joint statement by Yaga, by Women Trust Fund,
KDI.
Africa, yes, and that statement is explicit picture of what transpired and what is still playing out. I think we're beginning to see more a playbook, a future playbook of what to come. If we don't take time and correct some of these issues, you will see the same thing playing out in Ondo or even in 2027. I think this is something that is very worrisome, and taking into cognizance the amount of money and resources that we put into this election. It's unfortunate that the political class have decided to rubbish the democratic values and dividends that we are all working hard towards.
Let me quickly take you back, because before these elections in 2020, when Edo State went to the polls, there were fears were just coming out of COVID at that time, and Edo was going to be the first state to conduct elections post-COVID. There were also very strong tensions in the air, regarding the political arrangements. However, I think it was also the first time that INEC was also going to be testing the beavers ahead of the 2023 election. So Edo State was some test ground of sorts in many regards. And it does appear that that election was one of the things that made people have confidence that the beavers could, really be a game changer for the 2023 elections. If you were to analyze that election vis-a-vis the analysis of this one, how would you say that INEC has done in the conduct of elections, particularly in the areas that it has powers over? Because you can't argue that it doesn't have powers over whether there'll be violence or whether there'll be vote buying. Those are things certainly out of its control. It can only advocate. But in the areas where it does have control, would you say that it has improved from 2020, or did we retrogress?
I think maybe the COVID was a blessing in disguise, because somehow some of the processes and the provisions, in spite of the harsh realities of that time, were followed to a large extent. And we saw what looked impossible, the emergence of a political figure that was in hot contention with his political masters. However, I think some of the outcome was adjudged fair, in spite of the fact that, yes, there were irregularities, but I think the outcome was a bit fair compared to what we have today. Not because the incumbent didn't win. I'm strictly apolitical. I don't care who wins. And in this context, both APC and PDP somehow violated the rules, and including every other person, So, yes, in direct answer to your question, I think we had a fair election then compared to what we have today. Give it to INEC that in some quarters, they tried to do the needful, the introduction of the IREP, like my colleague said. Their effort in trying to mobilize to start the election on time were disappointed by the transporters and in some cases by the security operatives. It's unfortunate that these things keep reoccurring, despite the fact that we have informed the political umpire, including the political class, of these things and the adverse effect of them, because it affects the trust in and confidence in democracy. It affects everything. But I must also say, that one of the best takeaway for me in this whole process was the media coverage led by your station. I was very, very, very pleased. The level of coverage and on-the-spot assessment that most of your reporters, the risks they took, some of them were under the rain. I think we had the best of media reporting in this election, which to me is one of the best things that I would score 98%. And the coverage was very inclusive. So it's a heartwarming outcome of this election, and how people can put their lives at risk just to make sure that people will have information right in their living room. That's a good thing. But I think we need to sit down and interrogate the entire electoral process. If there's any time to call for reform, Mr. President, this is now the time to call for reform. We need total electoral overhaul and a reform that will produce what truly the people that are struggling every day, making effort to make sure that we have a true democracy and not a reflection of democracy. You know, every one of us has a part to play. And let me also use this opportunity more to say to Edo people, you don't take the law. Don't take anything, don't do anything that is completely against the law. Sit calm, sit well, be at peace, and let things play out. Those who are aggrieved will go to court. Unfortunately, the court is trying to replace the place of the ballot, and that's unfortunate for everybody. We're a situation where we will do the wrong thing and boldly come on a national television to tell our opponent, go to court. That had become the mantra for this kind of dirty democracy, and it must stop if we must chart a course for children born and unborn.
At the end of the day, Mr. Pele, you know, it's all about the electorate, the people who vote, the people who, well, while the media risks their own lives to go out to do their job, there is also those people who risk their lives, so to speak, to come out to vote. But let me take that question to Mr. Amadi. You know, one of the most important things for me during the elections is the voter turnout. And it would seem like, particularly during governorship elections, the number of people that come out to vote reduces compared to the number of people who come out to vote during national elections. And it's even lower for local government elections. I'm looking at the figures. It's less than 600,000 votes that were ascribed to the top three of the governorship candidates during this election. Less than 600,000. More than 2.2 million voters had already collected their PVCs. The election expected so many people to come out, but less than 600,000 were accounted for the top three. How significant is that for you?
Low voter turnout is not a new phenomenon. It's globally there's an apathy to elections. In fact, it's been stated that democracy is in remission. So it's not a new phenomenon. However, for the case of Nigeria, you could explain. There's so many explanations. When you militarize a normally civil process, the kind of rhetoric that we heard to the build up to the elections, you know, we had things of a do or die affair, you know, win at all costs. People have blood flowing through their veins. It's capable of scaring or putting people away from coming near the polling booths. So this is the reason why we always advocate for, you know, people to tone down their rhetoric. And when also before the elections, you have the security agencies put up a show, what they call show of force. You have security agencies, you know, drive around town in all their paraphernalia, you know, exhibiting various assault weapons. You also put fear in the voters, and then with the other variables, non-state actors that make various threats. These are the kinds of things that will scare voters. Like, another reason would be that voters have always worried that their votes may not count eventually. And then, like Mr. Kwele was saying, the problem of our electoral process, some you can pinpoint on actors on election day. But what you're seeing today, it's a reflection of what happened outside what happens on election day. The political actors have simply found a loophole on the various pronouncements of the courts. So the ballot no longer determines, or vote no longer determines what happens. When the innovation of the IREF and the BVAS, which was first tested in Edo and worked to near perfection. In fact, the IREF saved the day when it was first introduced 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, in Edo State, and we embraced it. However, there was a loophole. There was a pronouncement that talked about the determinant of overvoting. And that accreditation by beavers does not determine whether there's overvoting. And what determines overvoting is the voter register. And so it was tested by political actors such that the beavers gives a different reading. People write down all kinds of numbers they want.
Mr. Mahdi, while all of that is part of the process that you and Mr. Pele had spoken about, I'm just talking about the voter apathy thing, whether or not we actually, just 1 second, whether we actually did enough as a people, as government, as political parties, as the election umpire, to convince people that it is safe for them to come out to vote. That really is the question. As you said, the phenomenon may not be a new thing, but the decisions that will be taken by the political leaders will affect everyone, whether you voted or not, whether you registered to vote or not. But then you also spoke about the anticlimactic nature of the elections in terms of security. Now, on the one hand, you said, police came out to show, and security agencies came out with show of force and everything, and then on the election day, everything just kind of tapered down. It's a little difficult to really put into perspective exactly how to situate everything. You're saying that on the one hand, it may have discouraged people from coming out. On the other hand, it also ensured that there was no breakdown of law and order. So where can we find a balance here?
The question is, why are people not coming out to vote? And I'm explaining to you that, one, the build-up to the elections, you had violent rhetoric. You had people refusing to sign the peace accords. You had all that. And then you had security agencies, more or less militarizing the civil process. And then also, I gave you another variable, which is that if people feel that no matter what they do, even if they come out to their numbers, that the result has already been predetermined, that their votes will not count. It is enough to keep people away from vote, which is why I was explaining the reasons why people feel that their results will not count because of what has happened outside the day of elections. And then you also have, the other factors, for example, that put to the question our electoral register. You could have 2.2 million, registered voters. But the question is, the 2.2 million registered voters, are they really 2.2 million persons with live persons and not, the numbers that were inflated? Remember, this voter register comes from, I think, 2011 and has been built over time. And if you recall, if you have been following the process, this was a period when political actors were just pumping in numbers and registering people no matter what. And all that. So
you're thinking maybe the numbers have reduced over time, but there was no
what I'm saying is that the initial, before the beavers process, which now started, sifting out real voters, because the beavers improved the process of accreditation, because it now takes in, and that's why it's bimodal. It takes not just the fingerprints, it also takes the face. So for you now to accredit, you must be a real individual. And now the database, which is a register, was instituted when this technology was not at play. So I make bold to say that the 2.2 million voters are not real people if you break it down to the nitty-gritty of numbers. So if the people that collected, or the process of collecting a voter's card is such that you cannot even use it because beavers will find out, or beavers will not accredit you, most people will stay behind. So these are some of the factors. Like I said, securitization of elections. 2, feeling that your votes will not count. 3, is our voter register, is the number of registered voters, are they really real live people that you can feel, or is it overinflated? So when you put this into context...
What's interesting in that, Mr. Chima, is that the 2.2 is the number of people, 2.249 actually, is the number of people that have collected their PVCs according to INEC. But then there is also another question that Chamberlain had raised here, and let me take that to you, Mr. Pele, is the cost of the election. More than 300 billion naira was voted for the 2023 election. I don't know how much was voted this time around. And if the economic realities are to be considered, there's a likelihood of that being doubled for the next general election. And I'm not even sure, how much we have spent for the Edo election, how much we will spend for the Ondo election, and all of that. So in terms of the cost of the elections vis-a-vis the results that we get based on the permutations that you and Mr. Amadi have spoken about, what's your take? Should we continue in this path of spending so much money for this kind of result? Or do you think there's another way that we can begin to consider?
Ayo, thank you very much. I think my simple answer to that question is Nigerian election is one of the most expensive in the world. Taking into consideration our numbers, taking into consideration the over-preparation and very, very minimal performance. But I think I'd like to weigh in on what is responsible for somewhat voter apathy that we kept experiencing. And I agree with Dr. Chima, most of the postulations that he presented. However, I think I tend to agree with you more on the issue of voter education, which places the responsibility on all of us, first, as civil society, and of course, two, the electoral umpire. We need to do more as civil society in terms of voter education. You know, the electoral umpires, the EMB, Electoral Management Body, needs to do much more in terms of voter education. We don't tell the people about these elections. We don't prepare them well enough. We don't sensitize them around the provision that makes election very, very interesting. We scare them with all kinds of security issues. We cry foul, and I think the security operatives, they do this intentionally to get more money from government. And that's what makes this election over-bloated. And I think also the trend will continue unless we come back sometimes to launch an investigation into who spent what and for what and why. And at the end of the day, you know, are there proofs that the resources are mismanaged? Are there proof that people pocketed the money and didn't do what they expected to do? Because nobody is held accountable, because everybody feels that it's free lunch in Lagos or Abuja, you know, and they spend the money recklessly, do whatever they like. At the end of the day, they keep asking for more. Election in this country is too expensive, considering the suffering of the masses, how people are struggling to eat when billions are given to individuals that will never account how they spent it. It is unnecessary. It is shameful. It is shameful that in a country where people can't even eat 3 times, that we're spending billions and billions of naira in electoral process.
All right, gentlemen, pardon me, we need to begin to wind down now. Pardon me to jump in. Let me ask you, Dr. Amadi. I mean, you did say that at the moment you thought it was about 20,000 naira that they were using to buy votes. And so one wonders, going by what Mr. Epele was talking about, that look, people are struggling to eat. So, for instance, the votes that went to Mr. Akwata, even though he said yes, even if the road is tough, he doesn't mind, but the people told him he was their guy, but apparently maybe he didn't spend as much money. So the thing is, no matter how much voter education goes out there, if you offer electorates money, how easy or difficult is it going to be for them to reject it? If they're buying vote for 20,000 naira now, who knows, tomorrow it might be 30. Dr. Amadi, that's for you.
For me, Mr. Akwata is the winner of the election, a moral winner of the election, because he stuck to his principles in terms of refusing to buy votes. And for me, again, I said, it's if people have made up their mind that they want to cash out on election day, there's absolutely nothing the INEC or civil society or whatever messaging you want to drive can do about it. And the reason is simple again, because poverty has been weaponized here in where people have been so impoverished, and then the governance does not really get to them, and they feel the only day they can make a cash out, even if it's to have a pot of soup on that day, is on election day. It's pathetic, really. It's a very bad, because elections have consequences. But I may go to say that it can only go higher. And with a quick one, if the new technology, I think it was one of your colleagues in the studio that said, why can't we even introduce electronic voting? If you introduce a new technology, you would get more money to be voted, because the reason why you had over 300 billion was because beavers machines and were had to be purchased. If you want to do electronic voting, be prepared for an election that will get up to 1 trillion, because you have to buy the equipment, you have to commission them, and once you buy the equipment, more money. So that explains the reason for the. And then again, you have the so-called deployment of 30,000 policemen that is unaudited. Who audits the number of policemen on that day? But to summarize, like you said, it can only get worse if the people are determined to sell their votes.
So, Mr. Pele, what do we do about collation centers? How do we manage them? Do we eliminate them? What can the solutions be? That seems to be a major bone of contention.
Chamberlain, the issue of collation center is explicit. It's very well put together. The problem is the people that manages the collating and how and where they want it done. The problem is not the establishment. The problem is the operations of those collation centers, and the wickedness in the heart of some election management personnel, security operatives, and the politicians who think.
So how do we address that then?
Well, the point is to interrogate the possibility and the viability of those centers. Are they something we need to continue? It's not a question of coming on television and postulating and providing an answer. We need to do a critical stakeholder analysis of the situation and make a determination whether we should go on with it or not. But I agree with you. It plays out in this election. It contributed to some of the problems that we have. When INEC changes the goalpost at every moment, that is a problem. And that will be one of the bone of contention in this election. I think we need to stick to our guns when we make guidelines and when we make laws.
Okay, so tell us then, as you wind down, pardon me to jump in, what would you tell a voter who might be out there saying, look, I've been voting for a while, it's just always frustrating, my vote doesn't count, and I keep coming out. Why should I come out the next time?
Well, Chamberlain, thank you for the opportunity. Let me say generally to every Edo indigene, yes, one camp is feeling bad, the other camp is not. Please do not do anything that will violate the law and the peace of this wonderful state and the people. Let's stay calm. Let's do the needful. Let's wait and pursue our grievances in the most legal and legit way. It will not pay anybody to shed anybody's blood. It will not pay anybody to create chaos and mayhem. It doesn't take us anywhere. Finally, the election is something that we must not take for granted or play with. If we don't follow this process, we will produce charlatans.
All right.
We will produce those that we don't ever dream
Let's
of leading us.
Let's hear Dr. Amadi as we just wrap up.
Stay the course.
All right, pardon me. But Dr. Amadi, what would you tell such voters?
I would simply ask voters to continue to stay the course and hope that someday a Daniel will come to judgment.
Hope? But they always say hope is on a strategy. How do we just hope? Because it's going to be tough and challenging to keep hoping
because
and not do anything.
The truth of the matter, Chamberlain, you talked about collation centers.
Yeah.
The intent of IREV was to bypass collation centers so that by the end of any voting, every Nigerian has seen it. You don't even need collation centers, has seen the results. But we have seen what politicians have done to that. When you have a situation where you pump results on freely from the polling unit and upload, the whole system of trying to bypass collation has been defeated because now the rigging has now been taken to the micro units of polling units at that place. So I think we need to have a conversation, and because to inspire confidence into Nigerians to continue to vote and to believe in democracy.
All right.
The simple thing of voting, the electoral process must be cleaned up.
All right, so I have to thank you because, I mean, actually, if people don't come out to vote, if you're already coming out to vote and you have these kind of things playing out, so imagine what happens if you leave it all out for them to do whatever they want. So I guess that answers, well, maybe to a large extent. So, gentlemen, thank you both for talking to us this morning, Dr. Chima Amaji and Mr. Jake Epele.
Thank you, Chamberlain, and keep doing the good work. Channel, you're one of the best. Keep doing what you do.
Thank you. Well, Business Morning comes up on the hour.
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. And yes, we're doing business for just about 30 minutes away from the Edo politics. I know that one of these days we'll hope to have an election that will have majority of the people's votes represented, and then we'll have less of those aftertalks. And now the courts will get busy. I can't imagine. But let's do business. For now, we start from the global space. Prices of oil rose on Monday, buoyed by concerns that heightened conflict in the Middle East may curtail regional supply and expectation. Last week's outsized U.S. interest rate cut will also support demand. Let's look at the numbers right there. We see gain for both features that we look at. This is November features. It gained 60 cents. That's for Brent to $75.09 a barrel. That's 0.8% up. While for WTI, it gained 64 cents. That's 0.9% at $71.64 a barrel. Well, the impact of that Federal Reserve cut is still there, even though it's getting to the end of it. And then a dip in the United States supply in the aftermath of the hurricane. Remember, Hurricane Francine disrupted supply. And then also, of course, you have the Middle East also affecting price at this time. Come back home now and look at the Naira. We saw a gain in the Naira at the close of trade on Friday, and that's because of another intervention by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So we see closing the week on a good note, 0.16% for NAFEM. It opened at 1,544 Naira 2 kobo, but closed at 1,541 Naira 52 kobo. That's a gain of 0.12%. I think that's equal to about 2 Naira 50 kobo added to the value of the Naira by the close of trade on Friday. NAFEX also gained 0.45%, but it's still closed at 1,611 Naira 97 kobo for NAFEX at the close of trade last week. CBN remains active in the market. I guess that's expected at this time. Now let's give you energy price watch for the month of August. Now you may be surprised that perhaps the expected noise we've heard in the energy sector in the last couple of weeks is not captured. Please remember, this is the first, mostly this data they're collected in the first 2 weeks of a month. So we're talking of August now, then we're looking at the first 2 weeks, mostly an average price during the first 2 weeks of August. So let's remember that, because it may not capture some of those movement that we've seen between late August and September, which we're still seeing. So looking at petrol now, we see for petrol, year on year, the price went up 32.51%. at 830 Naira 46 kobo. That means that by August 2023, the average price of petrol per liter was 626 naira 70 kobo. So you fill in the gap what you're paying now. And then month on month, there was a 7.78% difference month on month. So that means by July 2024, it was 770 naira 54 kobo. But obviously, it had gone up to 830 by August. Now, when we look at by states profile now, we see Benue State had the highest average retail. Now, I think Benue is one state of interest. When you look at the issue of inflation, Alhaji did look at states' inflation last week, and we saw Benue popping up. Knowing that a major driver, at least before the last month, major driver of inflation in Nigeria has been food. We know food in Benue is the food basket. At least you have yam, so you wonder why. So I guess we can trace it to energy, because you see Benue State leading when it comes to the highest price by state. So Benue State has the highest average retail price at 941 naira 24 kobo. That's petrol per litre, while Delta has the lowest. Perhaps all those illegal bunkering and refineries are feeding into Delta, so it reduces their price. So 667 naira 50 kobo. That's what we have, the lowest average price for the month of August. Now let's look at others. The next one would be diesel. That's automotive gas oil. So we see for diesel, the month of August, we did see an increase. I wonder when we'll see a decrease. 64.58% year-on-year increase. That's what we saw for diesel. 1,406 naira 5 kobo. From the year, that's August 2023, it was 854 naira 32 kobo. So within a year, we had more than 50% increase in diesel. And then I thought that the price of diesel had gone to about 1,000. Still 1,400. Year on year, it went, month on month, beg your pardon, this is year on year. Month on month, went up almost 2%. So by July 2024, it was at 1,379 naira 48 kobo. Meanwhile, by August, it had gone to 1,004. Kaduna State had the highest average price at almost 2,000, 1,930 naira 79 kobo. Lagos State, close to, the source, I guess, that should be the factor driving it, making it the state with the lowest average price of diesel at 1,237 naira 14 kobo. From there, we go to cooking gas, liquefied petroleum gas at this time. And this is looking at the refilling of 5 kg cylinder of liquefied petroleum gas. We saw an increase month on month of 7.62%, at 6,430 naira 02 kobo. It went from 5,900. So that means in July, it was 5,974, but had gone up to 6,430. That's 5 kg cooking gas. While year on year, we see 56.25% from 4,000. So it was about 4,000 in August 2023, but of course, by August 2024, it had gone up to 6,000. Benue had the highest price at 7,000. Taraba had the lowest at 5,600 naira 67 kobo. And I think the final one on the list of the energy watch we're doing this morning is kerosene. Look at kerosene there. This is for a litre. So month on month, we saw an increase of 4.39% at 1,847 naira 59 kobo, while it was 1,769 naira 80 kobo in the month of July 2024. It had gone up to this by August. Then year on year, there's a 45.21% increase there. You have it, going from 1,272 naira 40 kobo. Zamfara had the highest average price, 2,566 naira 67 kobo. Taraba had the lowest. So I wonder how many people, just out of curiosity, are still using kerosene. If it's this expensive, it used to be for the people in the lower part of the ladder. But if it's this expensive, then I wonder of what use is it to go through the stress of using kerosene and other stove and the smoke and the unhealthy factors that surround using it at this time. So perhaps maybe when there's no more use, we will see the price reduce. So that's the energy price watch for the month of August. I'm sure we'll have more interesting numbers by the time we're doing that of September. Just cast your mind back to what has been happening the last couple of weeks. The Dangote, Petrol, the NNPC picking up and not picking up, and all of that being a part of it. Let's leave the energy space now and do core economy. King's College Old Boys Association 2024 has held its 115th annual Founders Day lecture with the theme Achieving a Secure Nigeria by 2030. For the keynote speaker, former Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy of Nigeria, Mr. Mansour Mukhtar, in achieving a prosperous, stable and secure Nigeria, leadership must be seen as an inspiring force. It's a meeting of Old Boys Association of King's College in Lagos, and the caliber of individuals in attendance explains the esteem the school has enjoyed over the years. The focus here is, however, not internal matters, but national economy.
Increased educational investment can significantly assist in developing a productive workforce and reclaiming the generational loss stemming from past failures. However, we must also pay greater attention to the neglected area of technical and vocational education to impart relevant skills and bridge the jobs and skills mismatch.
The issues are further dissected by a panel. Weaknesses which may have hampered and accelerated development made up the conversation.
There's a need for us to reskill our civil service and to strengthen our institutions, which could help us get on the way to the promised land of a secure Nigeria by 2030.
It is not a long-term sustainable strategy, because when you're subsidizing, at some point, real money has to exchange hands. If it's government to government, it can go on for a while, but if it's government to a private enterprise, at some point you actually have to pay the private enterprise. But the takeaway is, yes, it is to stimulate production, not with the aim of making the price of the product cheaper.
Known for his matter-of-fact talks, former CBN Governor Muhammadu Sanusi hits on the austere situation in the country
communication is
and its
also
management.
about setting an example. It is fine to tell Nigerians, and we should tell Nigerians, that we cannot afford certain subsidies. We don't have the money. We are too much in debt. But when we're telling Nigerians that we do not go buying SUVs for senators, we do not go buying private extra presidential jets, we do not go spending billions on politicians. This, if you're doing austerity, it has to be across the board. Nigerians need to see that we actually understand that we cannot continue with lifestyle. What we've seen is that the politicians have not in any way made any sacrifices.
The concerns expressed here are not new. The difference would be when the concerns become policies that are implemented to effect the needed change. Now, the issue at hand now is that the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, begins its meeting today, the 297th MPC meeting. They're holding today and tomorrow. So we expect to get a decision tomorrow. But as usual, we would like to see what to expect, from this meeting. We do know that inflation has tapered twice now, and that is a major consideration for the meeting. Energy cost, however, is a threat to that reduction in inflation that has been recorded in the last 2 months. So let's discuss this and a whole lot more with Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma. He is the Chairman, Advisory Board of CIPA, and CIPA is the Center for Economic Policy Analysis and Research of the University of Lagos. Professor Nwokoma, good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so even as we speak, I believe the meeting would have started of the MPC. We know that we would have expected a soft landing after 2 months of reduction in inflation. But now we have energy prices, which is, we know, a major factor after food into inflation number. So I wonder what you see as considerations and priority for the MPC as they begin their meeting today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think you raised an important point, very, very critical, about the inflation rate. It has come down for 2 months now. It's about 32% currently. And I think what just happened about energy prices, it raises some kind of concern whether this fall in inflation can be sustained. Because when you have the price of PMS, which is a major driver for pricing, because goods and services, goods have to move from point A to point B. And of course, they move with transportation. And that multiplier is very, very strong in driving inflation. So I don't know whether that can be sustained, the fall in inflation over the past 2 months. So I want to believe that the Monetary Policy Committee will take that into consideration, that this party, this euphoria, this excitement about the fall in inflation will be short-lived because of the impact of energy prices. And I think that should come into play in what they decide today, tomorrow, as regards what the NPR should look like. Because to me, it's the energy issue is quite significant.
Yeah, but I mean, can't we say that perhaps we are attaining a kind of stability now that Dangote's supply, should be expected or has been expected? We don't even know when, it gets, but we do know that NNPCL has, taken off some of the products from Dangote. Shouldn't that give us a kind of succor that there'll be supply and stability even in the price?
I see it slightly differently, because we have this kind of contention between Dangote and NNPCL as regards what the pricing about their buying from Dangote and all that. There are so many issues that have to be resolved because that sector needs a lot of reforms. Many persons feel that way, and I feel so too. The operation of NNPCL is actually shrouded in so much mystery. People now begin to wonder what actually is the actual price. Is it that those who are importing are trying to sabotage Dangote, or what? What are the issues? Because unless that is resolved, the benefit we may gain from Dangote being operational may actually be lost because of issues. People talk about cabal or whatever, and those who are importing actually will have a challenge in their business. So there's a lot of mystery concerning the role of NNPCL and Dangote and the marketers in this whole imbroglio, I will call it. So unless that is resolved, the price of PMS will still remain high. And if it remains high, it has this pass-through effect on inflation. So I think government needs to help, not just by talking about monetary policy issues, changing interest rates, but resolve this quagmire between importation, Dangote production, getting crude for Dangote to operate. There are so many issues that have to be resolved so that you can have an appropriate pricing for Dangote products. And then that will have a pass-through effect on the entire economy. The Monetary Policy Commission should be able to take that into consideration, not just changing rates. There are other issues that are largely structural that have to be resolved for us to get it right as regards energy prices.
So does it mean that we should still expect another hike and all the negative effects that go with it in this meeting?
My concern is that there should be no hike, but because the previous hike in monetary policy rate, in my view, I did not subscribe to that, because central bank appears to feel that inflation is the inflation we have in Nigeria now is a monetary phenomenon. I see it otherwise. The inflation we have currently in Nigeria is structural. It's usually cost push. There are so many factors that are not monetary that are driving inflation. Things like insecurity, production in agricultural sector, which affects food inflation. Issues about infrastructure, which have and the foreign exchange issues, input prices, imported input prices, which affects manufacturing. So there are many issues that are structural, which have to be addressed, it's not necessarily try to hike rates. In my view, government should focus more on addressing these issues about are largely structural. The issue about energy prices with NNPC address that. The issue about security address that. Inflation will come down. In my view, the Monetary Policy Committee should not in any way, that's my view, consider hiking the NPR. In fact, the economy is shrinking currently. When this government came into office last year, Nigeria was the largest economy in Africa. Now we are fourth because the economy is shrinking. We're taken by South Africa, by Egypt, by Algeria. Nigeria is now fourth on the continent because our economy is shrinking. So we need to encourage growth, not just fight inflation, which can address inflation by looking at the other issues that are largely structural. It's basically cost push. Address inflation by that point. Then when it comes to growth, make credit available, make the environment conducive, then we'll be able to bring up growth. If we keep on hiking rates, what are we going to do? We're going to attract portfolio investment from abroad. And let us also know that globally, monetary policy is easing. Even in the US, they are easing their monetary policy. They are cutting rates. So hiking rates is not the way to go, in my view. If you want to address inflation, address the issues that are largely structural. And then you even need to lower rates because the global economy is lowering rates. Nigeria, in the central bank, in my view, should consider lowering the NPR so as to create room for economic growth. Unless we do that, the economy will continue to shrink.
Yeah, but Professor Nwankoma, if you talk about lowering rates because others are lowering rates, they would point out the fact that the factors are different. Where we are at this time, our state of economy is different compared to, look at the US. They've been fighting inflation. They have a target and they are on that target. Even South Africa also. But on the other hand, if you say they shouldn't, that's a monetary policy, what other instruments can they do? Other things you mentioned, they are for the fiscal authority to handle.
For the other economies, basically, they have their own challenges. Nigeria has. And our challenge currently is bringing stability in the system, which appears to be so, but it is actually transitory, in my view. If we keep our rates high when the global economy is lowering rates, attraction to be able to attract foreign capital, it's not going to bring in FDI because it's not, and more, even if FDI comes, it's not even based on such changes in your NPR. FDI to Nigeria are largely resource-seeking FDI. They are coming for resources, maybe oil sector and all that. They're not coming for efficiency. They're not coming for the market. Only FDI for MPN came in for the large market. Basically, hiking rates or keeping the rates constant because the world is keeping it, they have a different condition may not be the way to go. Because our own circumstances they mean that we need to grow as an economy. We need to increase the tempo of economic activities. We need to empower the medium and small scale industries. We need to make credit available. Remove the credit squeeze. Let money be easily available, and then we cannot begin to enhance growth. That's our concern. So what the world is doing, it affects us, but basically, what they are doing is even helping us to know that hiking our own rates will not actually be there because already they've helped us by lowering rates. So definitely, even if we, at the worst case scenario, we should keep the rates the way they are. Or, in my view, lower rates. Because our current condition is that we need to grow the Nigerian economy. Currently, it is shrinking.
But Prof, can we look at the benefit of this hike, FPI? We've seen the government raising a lot of money from the money market. Could we count that? At least now the CBN can easily intervene in the market. Could we count that as gains of this hike? At least one of it?
The hike, I don't really see any long-term gain. The gains in the hiking of the rates actually are just are temporary, because just like the former central bank governor gave an illustration about somebody who is about to die, and then you need blood for that person. And the only available blood is HIV-infected blood. And what do you do? Do you say, okay, this person needs blood, but the only available blood is HIV-infected? And then he says, why not take the HIV-infected blood and then revive the person, and then after that, you don't begin to treat HIV. That was the thinking. So that taking in these are hot money, it's portfolio. When you begin to hike rates, you are bringing in like you say, oh, blood. Any blood is still blood. But if you have alternatives, you don't need to take HIV blood. If you have alternatives, except you don't have alternatives. But I don't think Nigeria is in that strict condition where we must, because we are being assisted by the global economy. So the benefits for hiking rates, in my view, are basically short-term in nature, because the economy, the money we are bringing in does not keep you for a long time. It's actually short-term effect. In my view, the best way to go is to lower rates by some basis points. And the worst case scenario, keep it or hold. Hiking rates, it may have benefits that are but actually short term, and which may be counterproductive for the growth of the economy, which in my view is what we need. There's also much unemployment. Get people engaged. We should get people engaged so that jobs can be created. Lower rates so that we can grow the economy.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, yes, there are more reactions from the just concluded Edo governorship elections. Ralph Obasugye joins us as a chieftain of the Labour Party. He joins us virtually from Benin. We also do have Reverend Olu Martin, spokesperson for Edo PDP campaign, also joining us virtually. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
All right.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, let me start with you, Mr. Obasugye. Well, your candidate, 22,763 votes from the polls. I don't know if this was what, of course, everybody got in there hoping to win. But for you, was this a fair assessment of how the votes turned out?
No, Chamberlain, there is nothing that was fair on Saturday. Everywhere was calm, but there were skirmishes. It was a shambolic election because in my unit, where I was supposed to vote and just go away, I got there to meet the shenanigans going on. And there was a scuffle between PDP and PDP and the APC agents and coordinators, and that stopped voting momentarily. The PDP succeeded in chasing away the APC people, and within 10 minutes, the APC people came back reinforcements. There was a truce amongst them, and then voting continued. But I would like to let you know that it was a sad episode. There was no election. There was no security personnel. And as at the time I got there at 7 a.m., the ballot box was already half full. And I asked, when did these people vote? Because voting was supposed to start at about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So why, as at 7 a.m., people had voted? There was no answer. And then the voting started, and I saw all the malpractices going on. Vote buying. Initially, they were paying 5,000. When the APC was paying people 5,000, PDP recouped and upped theirs to 10,000. And here we were as Labour Party, we don't have those resources, stolen state funds to be funding elections.
Did you see this yourself, that PDP paid 10,000 to the voters?
I was there. I have sent video clips. In short, my phone was seized when I wanted to start recording. I had to go get the help of FRC personnel opposite the polling unit, and they now helped me to retrieve my phone. I was ruffled up, they threatened me with everything, Young boys, mainly of PDP, they said they will waste me, they will deal with me, that I'm an old person, I should just vote and go. But I stood there to observe the whole thing.
These are PDP members?
That even when the beavers did not accept or accredit people, they wanted them to vote, and I said no. I stood my ground, and that was what really led to them roughing me up and threatening to beat me up and so on and so forth. There was no security personnel for the entire day. And I made phone calls to all the other units that were around my area, my zone, no security personnel. So this was a prearranged orchestra. It was a drama that went on. It was not an election.
Wow.
And if INEC is what he thought, there should be a rerun.
All right, let me bring in Mr. Olumasis on this one. I mean, hearing this, lots of people are surprised. So PDP engaged in this. That means it was a survival of the fittest. So it wasn't just because I know that PDP did accuse APC, but now he says he was there and he witnessed this. What do you say to this?
Thank you, Chamberlain, for the opportunity. Again, is that you must understand that elections are conducted across, over 4,000 polling units. So your record of activities will be at best the record of activities that you recorded in your own polling unit. I voted in Ekpom, and I'm an Asian man, and I voted in Upanu Primary School. And where I voted, I didn't have any of such activities. Maybe where I concur with him is the fact that police presence, especially in terms of forestalling the breakdown of law and order, was ab initio absent in spite of the over 40,000 security personnel that were recruited. I did see in a couple of places money exchanging hands, which has almost become part of our norm. But I can confirm to you that in my polling unit where I voted, at least the people that I handled, that I was responsible for, there was none of them that I gave, financial incentives to. My father is the oldest person in that place, and we had also contributed our quota in terms of impacting young people there. But overall, I think that the election
ran beneath, standards. Turnout was still, less than 30%. And then the guarantees that we had, that we're supposed to have, from INEC, we did not get it. We're monitoring the IREV. So why employ technology if in the final analysis you are not going to depend on the results that came out from the IREV? Chamberlain, I can tell you that no election takes place at the collation center. All elections take place at the units. And the results of the election at the unit are filled in a form that is called the form EC8A. That form has the result of all of the elections that took place in the over 4,000 units. That form EC8A is snapped and uploaded, to the IREV. You will not expect that the results of form EC8A will be different from EC8B because elections take place at the unit. So when we monitor the elections on the IREV, 90% of which had already been uploaded as at about 8 p.m. on the 21st of September, and everybody had drawn their own individual, independent conclusions at their different, polling, at their different situation rooms, until we heard that collation had been abandoned in some of the, local collation centers, in some of the wards, and in some of the local government, and they were moved, to the center where INEC is, where, all of the rest of the shenanigans, happened. Many of our agents were not allowed to monitor the collation of results.
I get the point you're making, because we've equally asked questions of observers about what to do about collation centers. But from what Mr. Obasege is saying here, assuming PDP had won the elections, he says, look, you cannot claim to be a saint in this matter. It turned out that it was for the highest bidder. Both the ruling party and your party engaged in those actions. That's what he's suggesting.
No, let me tell you something, Chamberlain. In every electoral process, people are not allowed to self-regulate. You can make allegations, but we have security agencies. There were units that EFCC went to, because all over the world, and not just in Nigeria, politicians do whatever they think is necessary. And I use the word politicians advisedly, because the political peculiarity in Esan West local government, Unit 9, or Esan West local government, Ward 7, Unit 9, is different from the peculiarity of another, local government. So, and then we have different individuals who have different relationships. Bottom line for me is the fact that people will do whatever it is necessary. And I told people before, I've advanced that Americans are some of the worst people, because human beings are human beings. What whips people in line is when the law works. You don't expect that people who want to secure power will use their common sense. So we expect security agencies. People will attempt to do vote trading. Do not forget that poverty has also been weaponized. So it is the responsibility. Human beings all over the world are tended to breaking the law. It is the responsibility of, that's why they are called law enforcement agencies. They are supposed to ensure that the shenanigans in your language do not find expression in each of the polling units. We're not in a lawless society. But if you see a situation where security agencies appear to be overtly taking sides with the all progressive, Congress, to the detriment of every other political party, then you have reasons to be worried. That's my point.
Okay. Mr. Obasege, go ahead.
Yes. I mean, Reverend Olu has already alluded to it. He has already agreed with the things. One thing I agree with him of is that situation in each different polling units may be different. But as scientists, once the same phenomenon occurred in more than 60% of the polling units, you conclude in favor of the majority. When we did all our field reports, it was exactly the same thing that happened in my polling unit that happened in all of them. So it was the survival of the fittest, like you said, Chamberlain. They were competing and they were brazenly spending money. But that is not the saddest thing. The saddest thing is that hunger was weaponized. You understand? Hunger, because we Edo people, we used to say Edo is not Lagos. Edo people are always resolute, we are well educated, and we are steadfast. But on Saturday it failed because the country, APC, all of them, they have and PDP have impoverished the people. And I can tell you one phenomenon. I didn't see elders. I am well above 60 years of age. I didn't see people of my generation coming to vote. They were all kindergartens of between 20 to 35 years old, very unruly, all right? People that don't have principles. And because they were hungry, why did the elders not come? Many people, I asked some friends, why did not come and vote? They said, my brother, I couldn't buy fuel to come that distance to my polling unit. Others were like, even if I trekked, I can't get food to buy, so I didn't want to bother. Then the other ones, the majority said, our votes have never counted, therefore we didn't come out. But you could see the shameless thing. For instance, there were all indications that even the polling officers were already compromised, the police, because I don't want to blow my cover, but when he updated me, he said they arrived at that polling unit at about 6:15 a.m. and that the 2 policemen assigned to my unit actually came with the officers. And then he saw us trading. They were discussing, haggling. And the officer now said, no, 50K per person. And then suddenly they just walked towards the express and went away at about 6:30 a.m. And they never came back. Those were security personnel. So, and when you see the way the officers were going to accept beaver and voting car, PVCs that could not be authenticated by the beavers, either by iris, the eye capture, or by fingerprint, and they were still going to allow them vote, which I resisted, which was what led to Olu's men trying to ruffle me up. You understand? You could then see that everything had been pre-planned. And when one person was able to speak to me in my mother's language, which is Olu Martin's language, all right, which I speak very well, he then told me that they ferried them from Oloboda money. PDP came to pick them in a box. And then the PDP coordinator had a batch of cards in his bag. He calls their neighbor, you don't come, take your card. The boy told me that the whole arrangement was made at the voters card review. That was when they made the arrangement. So it was already pre-planned, it was a rehearsed and well-chorused action, and now the giants are fighting themselves. Unfortunately, Labour Party, we have our principles, we've never been in government, we don't have resources. Even if we had, we will never bribe.
Okay, but Mr. Masoge, I mean, since I thought he knew what you were talking about, that's why, but since he said, look, he doesn't know what you mean by Olu's men, could you share some light on
I was just saying, because Olu belongs to PDP, I'm just using that metaphor.
That's generalization.
Listen, it's a collective generalization. You are a PDP man, and you are speaking for PDP. I'm speaking for everybody.
Okay, so maybe members of PDP as you think they are.
Members of PDP, more appropriate.
No, the coordinator had PDP badge. He had the agent had PDP badge. And instead of one agent, in that place, there were 3 PDP people with their badges.
Yeah, so
and
just
they
simply say
were really
PDP men.
And they were the ones arranging it.
Don't
I have sent clips. Before they seized my phone, I had already recorded, because it is normal to have canvassers. Each party can have canvassers. And the PDP canvasser did a good job of his assignment, okay? And they approached me. When they approached me with the 10,000, I said I need 100,000 because they didn't know whether I was a Labour Party or not. I said 100,000. They said, Then they now spoke case at me on one line. That's too much. So they thought that I didn't board. They said, this man is a hungry man. And they continue with those on the queue behind me. It is sad what has happened. It was not an election. We have to have a new dialogue. Like I said, if INEC, because people are celebrating now, PDP was already celebrating before APC went to do their magic. In Akoko Edo, because like Olu Martin said, voter turnout in all areas, apart from Oredo, and it averaged 15%. There was a great voter apathy. There was also ethnicity, which I cannot quarrel with. All right? Now, in Akoko Edo, there were about 90.8% voter turnout. How did they do it? When you know the terrain of Akoko Edo, it is more difficult to move from village in Akoko Edo. There's even no transport. How did they get 90%? Because that was where APC went to play, and that was where they swung the figures and cooked everything. So it is a certain, like me on Saturday, I couldn't sleep. Because if Edo people could sell their conscience for a porridge of pot, it is very disappointing. But like I said, the two big parties weaponized hunger. And in all dialectics, if you were a student of social sciences and political science, like I was, you would then find out that when you then impoverish people, you subdue them, and then they now begin to play you.
Mr. Obasanjo, I just want to ask you, because this issue of vote buying was long foretold. When people were talking about analysis of the elections, pre-election analysis, and some of the things that they thought could be obstacles in a way, one of the things that came up alongside violence and, of course, the tense political atmosphere was the issue of vote buying. So it was something that even ordinary members of the electorate were already aware of. We've seen it in previous elections. This is nothing new. The question was now the scale in which it was going to happen, given the current economic realities. And this information was already out there. Is it that your party didn't have any strategy to forestall the outcome or whatever was going to happen from taking away their own votes?
Let me tell you, Mokwe, our strategy, we were very organic in our ways. The party grew organically. Our campaign was very organic. It was only Olumide Akpata that went to all the nooks and crannies of this state. Go and check it. He went to all villages, all wards, met everybody, traditional rulers, the high and mighty, the low, and he spoke to them and he dialogued with them. And the support was overwhelming. What the result you are seeing is an opposite of the support we got in the streets. But there are other two things: the weapon of money and then intimidation. We don't have instruments of intimidation. It is the two parties that have instruments of intimidation. And in many polling units like Atidogbo and the rest, they chased away all our polling agents, intimidated them, and those people, out of fear, abandoned the polling units because they told them, and you can imagine threatening a woman who's a polling agent. And they all were reporting back. And we were calling on the police, they never came. For instance, if the two policemen that came in the morning in my polling unit remained there, I would have been able to complain to them and they would have intercepted the back of voters' card that the polling PDP polling agent was holding. But it was not there. So how do you get sanity? At my age, and with all the clouds, I was a senior technocrat. I was roughened up by these young boys of the PDP. And they said they would deal with me. So it was not a free and fair election.
Mr. Olumartin, it does appear that even though your party is totally unhappy with what the results that have come out of this election, they're not saints either. From the allegations of the spokesperson of the Labour Party right now, it does appear that you were simply outdone by the other political party. Is that the situation?
Yeah, no.
Sorry, sir. I have the floor now,
I was being asked.
No, sir, it's my question.
You're only being outdone when you are on the same pedestal, when you are spending money on eating.
Mr. Obasanjo, I'm afraid that question was actually for Mr. Olumartin, if you don't mind.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. It is first of all important to clarify that myself and Mr. Obasanjo do not vote in the same polling unit. We don't even vote in the same senatorial district. So I take particular exception to when he says Olumartin's voice. I do not think that we should personalize this discussion.
No, I thought we moved past that. So
no. You made an allegation.
I explained that because...
Sorry, sir. It is my responsibility to clarify. It's my responsibility to clarify. I must clarify. Because it's my name you are trying to rubbish and I should defend it.
Apologies. So let's move past that.
Nonetheless, I should make my explanations that we don't vote at the same polling unit. So if you make allegations and there's nobody's name that appears on ballot boxes, Labour Party is what we see, PDP is what we see, and APC. So it's better to direct whatever allegations you have to a structure. It's a structured election. It is not a personal election. And moreover, we don't vote at the same place. So I didn't think that comment was necessary. Nonetheless, your apology is, noted. Again, Makwe, I constantly like to mention that the reason why we have regulatory agencies, in this particular instance, the police, is that you don't expect typical politicians, and I use the word typical advisedly. You don't expect them to self-regulate. Politics is a game of interest, both personal interest and the larger interest. So human beings will always be human beings. And the tendencies of human beings all over the world is to take advantage of lapses. That is why you have interventions by the law enforcement agencies that should make sure that some of the unlawful or some of the immoral tendencies that human beings exhibit is nipped in the bud because they are law enforcement agencies. It's not.
If you can, just 1 second, if you don't mind. Why shouldn't we expect adults in a civilized, organized process to self-regulate?
If we expect them to self-regulate, they will not have law enforcement agencies. I have had the opportunity to be live.
So essentially, you're saying then that that the essence, having laws in place is insignificant because there are processes, there are guidelines, there are laws that these politicians and political parties ought to follow. They ought to have modes in which they guide themselves into these elections so that we can instill confidence in the outcome. Isn't that the case?
There are laws against kidnapping. People still kidnap. There are laws against armed robbery. People still burgle people's houses, and
most certainly. And we have security agencies who are as you say. Just a second. We expect security agencies to ensure that there are no kidnappings. We expect that security agencies will ensure that there is no banditry, but we still have banditry and we still have kidnappings. So if you are comparing banditry and kidnapping with an electoral process that is public, popular, politicians are seen every day, I find it a little interesting. Don't you think it's interesting?
Okay, and let me even take it from your point. We have police presence in all of those polling units. Why do we have police presence in those polling units? If we expect human beings to self-regulate, we're talking about human behavior. That's why you have regulations. Even scripture is clear that because judgment against an evil act is not executed speedily, the heart of man is set to do evil. That's why you have law enforcement, even in institutions. You ensure that people come early. In channels, I'm sure that channels as an organization has an HR. Channels does not expect that every employee of Channels organization will behave normally. That's why you have punishment. There are punitive measures. Okay. Because if you have human beings,
I'm hoping that you expect that the laws
they will naturally misbehave.
Yeah, I expect that you would. I'm hoping, Mr. Olu-Martins, just a second, that you will ensure you are expecting that the law will take its course on any politicians that is found wanting. But Mr. Obaseki, let me just quickly ask you, just 1 second, because we are running out of time. But Mr. Obaseki, let me ask you, this is the result that has been declared by INEC, and everyone seems to have told a particular line about this. For the Labour Party, your party, what's the next line of action?
I cannot speak to that yet because we have leaders, I have my principal, I have a candidate. I think that would be, the next course of action will be articulated. But like you said, let me use your words from the studio. We self-regulated. We are law-abiding. We played by the rules. Okay? There's no one person or one organization that has a monopoly of violence. But we will not condescend to go and be sponsoring thugs and everything so that they can counter. If we had an army of thugs, then just imagine what would have happened in each polling unit. So when they were chasing out Labour Party agents, we obeyed, but we were the underdogs. And we think that, people who saw what happened, even monitoring agencies have mentioned it. It is a sad thing that happened. With all the dumb results in INEC and so on and so forth. Because I will let you know that subsequently, they burnt the ballot papers in my unit. So you ask yourself, which ballot papers did they present at the collation center? Which from EC8A that did they present? Because they burnt all. I sent the video.
We need to go at this point.
They can show it. So it was just, there was no election at all. The two big parties were trying to outwit themselves. One has subdued the other. But if we want fairness, I think there should be a rerun.
We need to anchor at that point. Chief Ralph Obaseki,
for my leaders in LP.
We have to thank you for coming on this morning. He's the chieftain of the Labour Party, Reverend Olu-Martins, spokesperson, Edo PDP campaign. Thank you both for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at some messages. This one is from Yomi. He says, congratulations to Edo people. In the end, this is Nigeria. We must live doing what's right, not in a cold and boring way, but in a way that balances being wildly ethical with being absolutely wonderful. It is what it is. If you don't get it, what do you say that?
Yes, it is. If you don't get it, forget it.
Yeah.
And I don't get
I
it.
didn't see that coming.
I didn't get it, so I forget about it.
Exactly.
You sucked in 5 minutes.
Oh dear. No, Festus, our regular here, is also writing in. He says, our many CSOs are highly political with partisan individuals. Sadly, that's where they get their funding from. They've never had anything good to say about our elections. It's easier for them to blame INEC and security agencies and leave out the politicians who are the main participants. Nigeria needs strong and resilient CSOs and not chancellors.
Let me look at the one by Nikki.
I wonder what informed that comment, though. Go ahead.
It's a matter of time. Says, I'll say we've made little or no progress in our electoral processes and elections. That's from Nikki. As long as we continue to shy away from absolute electronic voting, we will never get it right with our elections. Let me also remind you that most of the riggings happen at the collation centers, much more than vote buying at the polling units. However, these guys have found a way to divert our attention to polling unit riggings. Someone with the eye on the ball.
I want to read this last one from Professor Enakena. He says, unfortunately, both the political elite and the voters' persistence in manipulating the electoral process is deplorable and iniquitous. I like that word. The deliberate impoverishment of the citizens who are economically trapped, living below the poverty line, has led to the abdication of morals to reject financial inducements by political bandits and career criminals.
That happened to be second to the last one, actually. There's the one from Law. Pastor Law, he says, the protest that preceded the declaration of the APC candidate, Mr. Monday Pueblo, and the uneasy calm that pervaded Edo State give the impression that the people's mandate may have been tampered with. Okay, well, there you go. That is it today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Asaf. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for watching. Please continue to keep us posted on your thoughts on the election so far. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. It's a Monday morning. Have a productive week.